That's it. It is showing we are live. Today is Thursday, the 23rd of August 2018. Patricia's with us, and special guest is DynoDon. Hello.
Hello, everybody. Glad to be back.
How are you, Don? Last time we saw you, you'd had a few months off, and you've been working now. So how are you? Oh, we've just lost Patricia.
I've been doing just fine. The weather finally turned for the better in about the middle of June. I've been able to get outside and get back on my airplane project. But the whole time I'm doing that, I'm still watching every video I can on the flat Earth stuff. So I'm not doing much about it, but I do watch a lot. So basically, it's all I do now. I don't.
What, your plane, you mean? Your project?
Yeah, I work on the plane, but I watch when I'm not out on the airplane. I'm always on YouTube, just watching, looking for new info on the flat Earth stuff. You know, the latest going ons and things. So I'm constantly. I don't even watch TV anymore. I just watch YouTube.
Yeah, for people who may not know who you are, tell us some of the things that you do, because you've got a gyrocopter. You've done Meyer's. I'd like you to talk a little bit about that, and obviously about what you're doing with your aeroplane. You do so many things. Just explain a bit more about yourself.
Sure. Basically, ever since I was a kid, I've always had a fascination of airplanes. I had a neighbor that lived down around the corner. I lived kind of out in the country that had a private plane, and when we were in summertime, we'd be out riding our bikes, and I'd see the airplane circling around. I was like, there he is, and we'd race down to go see him just as he's pushing it away into the barn, you know. So I've always had a fascination for airplanes. So after I did my 4-year stint in the Marine Corps, in aviation, I was a C-130 power plants mechanic. I worked on the engines and props of the four engine, had four big propellers driven by jet engines. So I was a mechanic for that for 4 years in the Marine Corps. And then after I got out, that's when I started working on the home-built aircraft field. My first project I built was a gyrocopter, an old Benson gyrocopter, and I put an old Volkswagen Beetle engine in it. Was my very first gyro. And then since then, I built a new one after that. And then the one you see now on my videos, my current one, I built about 10 years ago when I moved into this house. So, and the whole time I was flying and playing with those, I got into cars, Mustangs, and started souping up Mustangs, started drag racing. I owned a chassis dynamometer. That's where my DynoDon handle comes from. I used to dynamometer test muscle cars, performance cars. I used to do work on carburetors, fuel injection. I used to write programs and reflash the computers on these late model cars, but I did a lot of Mustang Camaro stuff. So I did that for over 10 years and finally got out of that to get back into my love of aircraft. And then when I moved into this house, that's when I got onto the kick of hydrogen fuel cells, trying to figure out how to make hydrogen. And that's where I came across the Stan Meyer's water-powered car project from the he started on it in the 70s, but he didn't really become known until into the mid-late 80s, I think it was. But I learned about it, I think, in the early 90s, actually. And since I live right beside Ohio, I'm from Pennsylvania. Grove City is only like 4 hours from here. So I thought, nobody seems to know where this buggy is, this water-powered car that he built. So I started researching into that and joined a couple of groups on the internet. And so I started digging in, and I eventually found the current owner of the buggy after like 2 months of searching. And I got to know the owner, which was one of Stan Meyer's friends that worked with him, was Charles Holbrook. And Charles passed away about the time I started looking for the buggy. And then by the time I found that his son had it, Charlie had already been gone for about 2 months. So I got to talking with the current owner, and eventually one thing led to another. I ended up being able to go down, take a look at it, took some pictures of it, and I got to be real good friends with the guy. And at that time, he was trying to sell it. The family was trying to sell it off. So I started posting on the forums, that I'd found this buggy and that the owner was looking to sell. So I helped the owner look for potential buyers. So anybody that wanted to put in an offer, a bid for this, everything that he had, they would talk to me, and I would work with Dave Holbrook at the time. And then once he would meet the criteria that Dave was looking for, then I would pass Dave's information on. So I was kind of a middleman. I would find potential people interested, and if they were serious, he didn't want to field calls from people that weren't, they had no money or anything like that. He wanted proof of income and stuff like that, bank account statements. If they wanted to make an offer, he wanted to make sure they had the money to offer. So I kind of did a lot of that. But when it came to talking dollars, that was just one-to-one with them. I just set up the potential investors. So I worked with him for like 2 years on that project. And while doing that, I became good friends with him. And he started letting me bring home some of Stan's stuff to see if I could figure out how it worked. So I was able to take all these pictures and all this research work, and then after Dave finally sold the buggy to a company in Detroit, Michigan, up there where all the auto cars are made here in the States, most of them. Well, after they sold it, I sat on my information for a year. Then I finally turned around and released what I had to the public, seeing that they weren't showing anything. So that was pretty much my stint of the Stan Meyer's water research. And along those lines, I started reading all the patents and learning electronics and stuff like that. So I learned a lot of electronics where I didn't know anything about it before. So I just self-educated on electronics. And I was able to build my own circuits and replicate a lot of the stuff that he'd done. But as far as anybody truly figuring it out, no one's done it yet. But I do believe that it is possible. I just finally gave up after like 5 years. I've kind of pushed it to the side to get back to my love of flying. So then I got back on the plane.
Yeah, you were trying to replicate it, weren't you? You didn't quite, well, you got almost there, didn't you?
Yeah, I was getting really close. The biggest problem you have with the work he was doing is electrolysis of water, breaking it down into the hydrogen, oxygen. He was the general Faraday's law requires a lot of amps current and low voltage to split the oxygen and hydrogen from the water molecule. Well, what Stan Myers did is he went around the other way. He came in from 180 degrees, and he decided or learned that you could use voltage potential to pull the bonds of the water molecule apart. So he was using very high voltage into the thousands of volts with very, very low current down into the milliamps and microamps of current flow. It's the same thing but in reverse. But it was a very high voltage, basically static electricity. Like if you're in the wintertime, you go across a carpet and you touch a metal doorknob, you get zapped. That's the kind of voltages he was working with. And he was able to disassociate the water by using very high voltage and very low power output. So it was a very efficient process. But no one's been able to replicate that high voltage. And I had gotten my cells up to over 1,000 volts, and it was just starting to show signs of the water disassociating with literally no current. But the problem becomes being able to create that high voltage. As soon as you get any kind of high voltage, and you stick it in water, it'll dead short. It'll short out. So there's a process of finding what he called a resonance frequency that would allow the voltage to go high and the current to drop, and then the water molecule to separate. And we were pretty much at that point. But the problem becomes creating the high voltage requires a real good knowledge of transformers and coils and stuff like that. And I got to the point where the material I was using, there were fairly large cores of ferrite metals that you make a transformer out of. I was at the limit of how much wire I could put on that thing. So that's kind of where I ended up stopping and decided to get onto my Corsair and finish this project and be done with it. So I haven't really touched that in probably 5 years, but it was a learning curve. But someday I may go back to it after I finish up my current projects.
Just asking you, because someone put distilled water in the chat room. Did you use distilled water, or was it just ordinary water?
Yeah, that's all I used. I used distilled water because In the process, what you would consider natural water, rainwater, anything like that, it has a lot of metals, minerals, contaminants in it, which makes it conductive. And my thought was, if you use distilled water, you don't have that problem with it. Helps eliminate the current flow in the cell. You want to minimize current flow, and the contaminants makes it harder to do. But in his process, it's very doable. But I use distilled water because if you could disassociate distilled water, that means you're doing something, because distilled water doesn't really electrolyze because it requires current flow, and that's where you have to add some kind of salts to the water bath to make it conductive so current can flow. But Stan Meyer's process was the complete opposite of that. It was high voltage, low current, not high current, low voltage. So by using distilled water, if you could make distilled water start coming apart, you were doing something.
Wow, thanks for that. Yeah, when I listen to you, you sound such a gentle man, but you're a real daredevil, aren't you?
Yeah.
Gyro plane, you love being up there.
Yeah, the gyrocopter, I always compare that to somebody who is a big fan of dirt bikes, motorbikes, cross riding autocross motorcycles. The gyrocopter I fly is like a dirt bike. I call it a dirt bike in the sky. You start it up, you take off, you throw it around, thrash it, bring it back down, and have, it's just a blast. So it's like a dirt bike in the sky.
Yeah, so for you, because obviously you're up in the sky, so you know anywhere, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that, because obviously we know from having you here before about some videos that you've made of your own. But what was it that made you realise that we were a flat plane?
It was, I was just watching videos on YouTube, and it just popped up as a recommended video. It was a flat earth video, but it was if you remember, it was called, what was that Go Fast rocket hitting the dome. It was. And I'm like, hitting the dome, what are they talking about? So I click on it and watch it, and it's just the rocket going up, and then you hear the boing, and the rocket stops spinning, and it starts slowly falling. And then I looking into it and found out it was a amateur model rocket, but it was put on by a flat Earth channel. I don't remember which channel it was, but it was a flat Earth video, and I had no idea because it was saying it was hitting the firmament dome. So I watched it, and I was like, what are they talking about here? And then I just started clicking on other videos, video after video. And then for the next 2 weeks, it was nonstop flat Earth videos. And I was pretty much sold, I mean, within a day or two, that after watching a few videos, like, wow, this makes a lot of sense. It's just one of those things that, you never think about it. You were told all your life you live on a ball, spinning ball, and you don't think anything about it. And then you start seeing this, and then it's like, that makes a lot of sense. Sure, they told us this, but they didn't tell me that, and you just start, it sinks in real easy for some.
Yeah, a lot of pilots, though, have realised it's through their gyroscope that we're flat.
The gyroscopes are hard to get around. It should show precession if the Earth was spinning, and they don't. It's just a lot of different things. It's just, like, say, something I've never even thought about or even questioned. You just learn the basics, and you even in school, I don't ever really remember learning anything about the Earth other than them telling you, you live here, we travel around the sun, there's this many planets. You learn the basics, and after that, it's every year they just keep pounding it into your head. But I don't ever remember learning that there was ever any test to prove any of that stuff. It was just what they told you.
Has it made you think any different now that you know that when you're flying? Does it?
Oh yeah, it makes you look more at your surroundings. When you're flying, you're always looking around, looking down. A lot of times, just seeing looking at places and people. Because you always, when you go flying like I do, it's just what we call sport flying. You just fly because you like to fly. You're not flying because you want to be a commercial airline pilot. You just enjoy the fact that you're flying. So you're always looking down. You're never really looking out ahead of you at the horizon and thinking, geez, that looks really flat. It doesn't look curved. I've never had that thought while flying. But now every time I fly, that's all you look at.
Yeah, Mr. Daredevil. We've seen some videos of flying around in that gyrocopter with nothing around you, just like basically just a bit of metal and a propeller on it.
Yeah, that's real uneasy to a lot of people, being able to fly. I don't fly really high with it because it even makes me uneasy at times when you start getting high. I usually fly under 1,000 feet. Usually it's only a couple 100 feet above the treetops because this is a short range aircraft. I can only fly for a maximum an hour before it would probably literally run out of gas. So the longest I've ever flown on it was probably 45 minutes at one time. And that's a long time to be out there just buzzing around by yourself. But, you start getting up to, some people can go up and fly 5,000 feet with these things, but I never felt the need to do that. You don't need to go that high. It just takes a long time and you use a lot of gas to get there. So I just fly high enough to give me a safe option. If you have any problems, you'd be able to set down somewhere. You got to be high enough. If you're over certain types of woods, a big area of woods, you got to be high enough that if your engine goes out, you got to be able to safely glide to a landing zone. So it depends on where you're flying as to how high you fly. And where I'm out here, it's fairly sparsely wooded. So if you have a problem, it's real easy to find a field to set it down in. I don't need a very big spot for that helicopter to land in. It doesn't land vertical like a normal helicopter. You still have to do an approach like an airplane, but you're coming in at a very steep angle of like 45 degrees. So it's a real sharp angle, but you can literally set it down in a parking lot at a grocery store, no problem.
So is this thing where you have to cage it because you're in a helicopter?
No, I don't have those types of instruments on on the gyrocopter. All I have is an airspeed indicator and a tachometer. That's it. And there's a little indicator telling me if the engine gets hot. That's in the tachometer. But no, with this, I don't even pay attention to the instruments when I'm flying. It's all seat of the pants. But there's no artificial horizon or gyros in this my gyrocopter, that is. The airplane, when I get the Corsair flying, that'll have basic instruments. It won't have one of those artificial horizons with the ball that looks like blue on top and black or green and brown on the bottom. That's the artificial horizon. Those things are $500,000 a piece, and they're not required for my type of flying. I just need basic altimeters, airspeed, a turn and bank, which is a kind of not a gyro, but you can put in a directional gyro, which is just a card compass, a flat looking compass dial that has a single axis gyro in it. But for home built, what we call VFR, visual flying rules, the instrumentation is minimal. There's certain ones that you have to have. You have to have an altimeter, airspeed indicator, and like a turn and bank or something. But you don't need those really expensive type gyros for these.
You don't go as high as a helicopter. So you don't go as high as a helicopter or a plane, but in your gyrocopter, you don't need a gyro.
No, you don't need. Yeah, there's. Go ahead.
You still go 1,000. Everything else has got gyros in it. So you probably don't even need a gyro, do you then?
No, the gyro is more for instrument flying. So, like, say if you're as a visual VFR pilot or visual flying rules, when you're up in the air flying, as like I do, a private pilot for sport or fun, you are not allowed to enter into clouds or any kind of bad weather, fog. So if you ever do get into cloud cover like that, that's where those gyros are needed. You have to be able to look at those gyros and keep yourself level and flying straight without climbing the center or crashing. That's what those gyros are for. They're for instrument flying rules, IFR, and that is a separate rating on your pilot license as well, IFR and VFR. VFR is the basic private pilot. IFR is instrument flying rules. That's where you learn to fly just watching the instruments, not looking out the windows at all. You can be in complete cloud cover and still fly that airplane straight and level. That's what the gyros are for.
I do understand that a little bit. I was watching one a few months ago about, they were showing you, it was an English one. It was actually quite old, but they were doing helicopters, you know, training them. So basically within hours, they've got like a bit like what they do to horses. They put them on and they can only look at the instruments and fly it from the instruments. They can't look out the window or anything else. I mean,
Yeah,
whoa.
we had you learn basic IFR flying when you're doing your private pilot license. They call it flying under the hood. You literally put on like a wind what do you call it, a face shield that you would use if you were working with a grinder and the sparks are flying, hitting you in the hitting the visor. But this visor is plastic; you can't see through it. And what it's meant to do is you pull it down low enough to where you can't see out of the windows, but you can see the instrument panels and you can see all the gyros and instruments. And then what the flight instructor will do is he'll put the airplane in an unusual attitude. He'll climb it, turn it, bank it, dive it, pull the throttle in and out, and do different things with it. And then he'll say, "Okay, take over." And you grab the controls, you look at the instruments, and you have to write the airplane up because he's got the airplane maybe climbing, banking, going down and turning and banking. The airspeed might be getting slow or fast, and you have to grab it and look at the instruments and level the airplane. So they teach you the basics of instrument flying to, if you happen to fly into a cloud or something and get disoriented, you'll be able to keep the plane level to fly out of there and get back into clear sky. So you learn the
And
basics of instrument.
what you said as well is there's different kinds of licenses as well then, flying licenses.
There's a everybody has the exact same private pilot license, and then you can add to that license, like adding a motorcycle license to your driver's license and so forth. So you can add on. The first step after your private is to get your commercial rating, and that's a fairly simple thing to get. Then you might get your multi-engine rating, then you might go into turbines, jet engine ratings, turboprop ratings. Everything requires a different kind of classification. Seaplanes, single engine, you have a single engine land, single engine sea, multi-engine land, multi-engine sea, jet, turboprop, balloon, glider. So there's many ratings you can just keep piling on. But then there's the commercial ratings, and then there's variations, I believe, of the commercial ratings. But yeah, there's many options to your license. Even if you want to be a mechanic, an aircraft
What's a helicopter
mechanic.
like? Is that another kind
Yeah,
of license then as well?
yeah,
Helicopter
yeah.
pilot.
You can physically get a helicopter license and never have an airplane license, and you can get an airplane license and never have a helicopter license. They're kind of a separate, but you can still get them all on one license. But since I'm a private pilot, I can't fly a helicopter because I don't have the helicopter license or the rating, but I could get it.
Gyro helicopter license.
The gyrocopter is a classification that falls under the ultralight category here in the States. As long as you can keep it under a set weight, speed, and fuel capacity, it's classified as an ultralight, and it doesn't require any license at all. But there are a separate rating called a gyro rating, auto gyro rating, that you can get for the heavier gyrocopters, like a two-place gyro or something that's a lot bigger and heavier than mine. Then you'd have to get it licensed and registered, get a serial, an FAA N number here in the States. We call them N numbers. The tail number on the plane. Then you have to get a rating, which is called an auto gyro rating. But we call them gyrocopters, but they're called auto gyros. But it's a separate
Thank
rating
you.
as well.
Thank you for that. Thank you for telling us that. Also, just back to this bit when you were finding out about flat Earth. What's the thing you dislike the most about this whole lie?
Oh, I guess probably what I would say would be the reason for the lie, the control. I think it's all done because of they want to have control. That's probably what irks me the most is they're putting us in this system, this monopoly or this system where money means everything and you can't do anything in life without money. They make everybody into this system. It's like I just hate I hate the whole system now.
Mm. Does that even like worse in a sense? Like we're just civilians, but you've been in the military. Does it sort of upset you a bit more? Because in a sense, you know, when you sign up for that now, you're laying your life on the line at any moment they want you to do anything. And then you've joined that, had a career there, and then, oh my goodness, it was all a lie.
Yeah, to me, looking back on it, luckily, you know, I only did the 4 years and got out. I got what I wanted out of it. It was nice and fun. If I never got married or had a girlfriend when I went in, I probably would have stayed in longer. But yeah, you look at it now and you look at how the governments use people and use things and how they do all these false attacks and flags to do something, and they're using the military, you know, as pawn pieces and starting these wars over nothing, and just because they want to do some land grab or sources, materials grab, whatever they want to reason is for it. You know, it's like it's such a waste to see them using. You know, when you're young, like I was 18 when I joined the Marines, and you know, you don't look into that stuff. You never watched news when you were a kid. And then now you sit and look at it, it's like, my God, I can't believe that, you know, they're going to send people over there and kill them because they want something. You know, it's just a game to them. It's sickening to see it now.
Yeah, and through that, they've made sure that we all hate each other. You
Oh
know,
yeah,
because they're the baddies.
that's the
They're
big
the baddies.
thing
But actually,
now.
us, we're the baddies.
Yeah, they've made everyone hate everyone.
Yeah. Everybody thinks, oh, well, they're against me, but they've done it to everyone. It's not just one race, one everything. It's everybody. They don't
Yeah,
care as long as we're all at each other's throats.
they got the whole system in chaos, but I mean, they're pulling the strings. You know, they're the puppet masters, and they've got an end game here. And sad to see.
Yeah, they don't care about us at all, do they? We're just like we're the animals. We're just the animals, like the other animals. We're all just well, like, we're just an experiment, I think. What's the
Yeah.
thing you'd most like to happen? So obviously, like you say, you watch all the videos, and you've been on Sun and Moon. You come on Sun and Moon. What would you like to happen now? Everybody to wake up.
Yeah, I would like.
Trump to say,
Yeah. I Trump was the first president I ever voted for that won. Every president I've ever voted for for an election have always lost because I always kind of voted for the underdogs. I hate both the Democratic and Republican Party. I'm a registered independent. I'm not affiliated with either party, but right now the Republicans are the least of the two evils, so to speak, and Trump was an outsider, but some things you might think he's still on the inside about, but I think he's pretty honest, and he wants to see, you know, America great again, like he says. So, but he gets nothing but a bad rap from the press, and I see the press as government extension of the government now. I mean, there's no difference between them and government propaganda. The, the media
it is
just
horrible to realise. So you signed up and you've done your bit in the Marines, and basically the television is basically Dallas and Dynasty. The whole thing is just a Dallas and Dynasty game.
yeah, it's definitely it's just propaganda control, you know, making people believe this. It's just all lies. It's all control, I think. I haven't watched TV now probably for over a year. I turned off the cable and got rid of it, and I can't watch it anymore. Everything you see is just
Feel like that. You see everything differently now. You can't look at it the same, can you?
yeah. It wakes you up. It's a slap. It's an awakening. But yeah, I'd like to
What,
see. Well, your
what did you
original question was my wife.
So
Sh
what does your wife?
she doesn't want to look at it. She come from a Jehovah's Witness family that she got out of after just before she started dating me. She was kind of separating herself from the witnesses, and and then once I saw this and was trying to show her stuff, she was, I don't need to get into another cult. But
It's not a cult though.
no,
It's the
no, but
truth.
I don't push her. I just let her do her thing, and I don't harp on her. I went to the convention, in November last year. I got to go down and meet Mark Sargent and Patricia Steer, and I got to see Bob and Jaron. Got to talk to all those people. So that's what I wanted to do, is meet these guys, and they were all great. That was a fun time.
What about your friends and family then, Don?
Uh, I really don't see a lot of people outside of work anymore. The guy I work with, I don't talk a lot about it to work, but I can talk to him and say stuff, and he doesn't. Uh, he doesn't really think about it, but he listens, and I haven't really pushed it a lot on too many people. A couple of my friends from my flying club, I talk a lot to them about them, and the one poor fella, he's like kind of on the fence. Yeah, I can see it, but he says, but then again, there's this and or this, and but he goes, I can't look at it. He says it's just too much. But they'll talk to me about it. The whole my gyrocopter club guys, they'll talk about it. We talk about it at times at our meetings. So those guys are open to it. Um, I don't get
Thing is,
out much as like I used to.
it's such a deep thing. Because and what when we say flat Earth, we're not just talking about a piece of land we're living on. It's everything. And so I don't think people quite get that. But those that are
Yeah,
into this understand. They're saying all the things, everything, because everything's a lie.
yeah. So there's people out there who know the answers, and they're holding it close to their chest. They won't share it because of they'd lose control. I think if it ever really got out that it was proven or shown, or some people ever came out and admitted that, yeah, it's a lie and we lied all about this, I think it'd be absolute chaos in the world. It would just everything would go to hell in a handbasket real quick, because everybody would want nothing to do with any government, and I think the whole system would crash overnight, and then it'd be a
Yeah,
mess
that's what
until
I feel.
things.
I think no one would ever believe in governments again.
Oh
Because
yeah, they.
like you quite a long time looking into this. You're also a pilot, so anyway now, and but you're still looking into things yourself. It's very deep, and without sounding rude to anybody, but it seems quite an intellectual thing. I think that's a bit that people don't like, that they can't get their heads around. If you're not very intellectual, then I don't mean to sound biased or anything, but do you understand what I mean? It's so deep, and you're looking up so many things.
Yeah, some people, the cognitive dissonance everyone throws around, especially the higher educated people. They've had this system pounded into their head, and they paid all the money to go to school to learn this stuff, and they just don't want to hear it. They just won't open their eyes, and then when you try to show them something, then no, 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 no. Uh, you know, I've been spending a lot of time listening to Nathan Oakley's flat Earth debates, and you got that Rumpus that comes in there, and all these other guys, and they won't give an inch, even when you prove them wrong time after time after time. They just won't give an inch. They are just so dead set. It's like those guys will never get it. I mean, they would be the ones that would commit suicide if they ever found out the truth. If it ever came out, the world was told it was a big lie, they'd probably kill themselves because they wouldn't be able to cope. It's amazing.
Yeah. It just came into my mind, by the way, because someone said it at the beginning of the hangout. But our son and me would like to give our best wishes to Martin Leakey. Anyway, I think everybody will understand what that's about. So I just want to give him our best wishes and much love. Martin Leakey. Anyway, you also have done your own videos, and a few that I really like. You did one on a vacuum, didn't you?
Yeah, that was my first one. That was one of my first thoughts that came to mind was, wearing a spacesuit in a vacuum, how it would blow up like a balloon. with any pressure inside of it. And people just can't seem to get it through their head. They want to think that space is absent of anything. It's zero. There's nothing. It's nothingness. But they can't put it in their head that it's not nothingness. It's a vacuum. It's a pressure differential, and that's basically all I was trying to show with my first video. Was a pressure differential would cause any airspace inside of a suit to expand and blow out like a balloon. But somebody sent me a file on the space suits. I can't remember what that's called, what the number of the suit is, but I went through it and leafed through the whole thing, and it was interesting. They do have layers of confinement in there that holds the suit to keep the suit from expanding. There's actual cables that tie the arms together so they don't spring straight out like the little kid in, I always equate it to Christmas Story. Remember the little mother dressing up the little boy to go outside in the cold? She put so many coats on him, his arms are sticking straight out to the side like a scarecrow. He couldn't move. That's what it reminded me. And that's what would happen with a spacesuit. All the extremities would just go straight out because of the pressure inside. So I was looking at it, but he sent me this thing, and I'm looking at it. I was like, it's interesting. All this whole document on a spacesuit, there wasn't one picture of the spacesuit. It was just sketch drawings, hand drawings of the spacesuit. I was like, well, I find it kind of odd that there's no pictures of this spacesuit, just illustrations or drawings. But I was reading through it, and I could see where they made attempts to keep the suit from ballooning, but the gloves will still do it. I mean, you can't constrict the gloves. Even though they're fat, they'd still just spring straight out, and they'd be extremely hard to manipulate. And they're thick like winter gloves, but they would still want to stay in a stretched out space, like taking a rubber latex glove and blowing it up. That's what it's going to want to stay like that. The arms would do the same thing. The legs would do the same thing. The suit, there's no way to really compress a suit around your chest, around your neck. It's all going to want to puff out. Anywhere there's an air cavity in the suit, it's going to puff out. And that was trying to make my point. And people just, oh, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. My whole point was pressure.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, carry on, Don. You haven't finished. Carry on.
Oh, my whole point of my video with the little sandblasting cabinet and vacuum chamber was to show the effects of differential pressure. That's basically what it was. And people were trying to make it out more. Oh, why don't you use something that's more real? The gloves expanding, stretching. Is like, no, it's a rubber glove. Yes, it's rubber, but it's not expanding. I says, you don't know the difference between expanding and ballooning. I says, a paper bag, you can blow a paper bag up and it'll balloon up, but it won't expand. It won't stretch. And I says, these gloves are rubber, yeah, but there's not enough vacuum in there to make them stretch. They're physically just ballooning out. And people, they don't want to hear it. They just think you're full of shit. You don't know what you're talking about. But it was just a demonstration on differential pressure and what would happen if there was a suit like that in space.
I know your hand was in a glove, but what did it feel like with your hand in this vacuum?
Oh, it's hard to manipulate because as you're trying to bend your fingers and hold on to a part, because when I use that little cabinet, or if anybody's ever used a sandblasting cabinet with a vacuum system on it, because as you're blasting, it creates a lot of dust, and a lot of that dust gets finer and finer as it blasts. So they put a vacuum system on there to suck out the dust. And then even there is a fresh air intake port that allows air in, but generally it's always pulling a slight vacuum in the cabinet. And when you're working, it's really hard to hold on to the part because the gloves want to stretch out straight all the time. The fingers want to go straight. So it's a chore, to hold this glove, hold the part in your hand while you're trying to sandblast it, or, blast it with the media. And that's why I did the video, because it's a good demonstration of what should happen in space of vacuum. So it's it gets tiring to hold your hands like that all the time.
Definitely felt a force in there.
Oh yeah, there's no mistaking it, because like I say, you can see in that video when you just turn the vacuum on, the gloves they're real floppy and they just lay down in the cabinet. As soon as you turn it on, they stand straight out like a cylinder. you put your hand in there, you can move your hand around in the glove without anything moving. But when you try to bend your fingers and bend your elbows, then it resists any movement. And that's only with a differential of like 2 or 3 psi. And a spacesuit is at least 5 or more. So I'm only, maybe a third of what the vacuum of space would be. It's not even close to the differential pressure.
Say your whole body in it in something like that. What would happen then?
Could you say
There'd
that
be so
again?
much. What would if your hand was struggling like that with just your hand in the vacuum? What would it be like if the whole of you in a suit was in a vacuum?
Yeah,
You'd
any
feel
kind of
it.
movement. Yeah, any kind of movement, just trying to bend your leg or move your arms, it would be an exercise. It'd be a workout. You're constantly working against a force that wants to hold the suit in a stretched out manner,
Yeah, it's all stupid, isn't it?
I don't know. I remember, like I say, with the Christmas story with the kid in the coats, I remember doing that in the winter myself. You put on 2 or 3 coats to go outside to play in the snow, and it's hard to move because the stuff won't give. It's almost the same effect.
Hmm. I was a bit like, obviously I've come across you, and I love that video, and I mirrored that video on Sun and Moon about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. But I've also found footage where they're outside, supposed to be live, Boeing or whatever it is, and one of them's moving and one of them is frozen and isn't moving, and people still don't see it, that's a lie, fake feet, CGI, not real, wasn't live, the whole thing. One's moving around, one's stuck there, not moving at all. So it's just so obvious it's a lie. I just wish I see it and understand it. What do you reckon to this waking up? What is it? Because a lot of people woke up a few years ago.
It's kind of like I was saying about myself. It's just something you never thought about. You just, it never come to mind because it was never questioned. Nobody's ever questioned it before. Now that people are questioning it and showing you alternative ideas, you look at it and think, that makes sense. I think it's just that no one's ever been exposed to a question.
I do know myself. I went to vote, and what I said to the girls there was, well, why isn't there a voting box? But I say no to them, but I'm still voting. And they went, oh, I never thought about that. And I think that's where a lot of people are, because we never thought about it. Because you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah, they just teach you when you're young that it was really stupid to think the earth was flat in the old days. And so they just push that at a young age, and then it's just something you never thought about. It's like the moon landing, the moon things. I never even knew that people were talking about the moon landings being fake until I started watching the flat earth stuff. And that's been going on for years and years, but I've never heard about it. I've never thought about it. I just never interested in it. Never
And
wanted
now
to
you
be an
can't stop.
astronaut. Yeah, now you can't stop looking at it.
Hmm. Also, you've done another nice video, which I also mirrored on Sun and Moon, but it was about the fact that when you're flying, or our line of sight is 360, so there is a curve, but not the curve that people think, that it's a 360 curve, because it's the eye of, I can't say it. You know what I'm talking about, Don. Whew, help me out. Line
The
of sight.
circle, your circle of sight, they call it now. Your circle of
Yeah.
sight. Yeah, because your eyes can only see so far to a vanishing point. You learn that in school. You learned it in art class. I learned it in art class that there's a vanishing point. You learn how to draw perspective, vanishing point. So your vision, you can only see so far. Say it's 10 miles, 50 miles, 100 miles. You can see 100 miles straight ahead. So if you look to your left, it's 100 miles to the left. You look to your right, it's 100 miles right. If you do a 360 degrees, that's what it is, 360 degrees. It's a circle of sight. So if you look at that sight and you're looking out at it, you're not seeing a straight line going left and right. You're seeing a line that circles around you. That's your circle of sight. So that line, your vanishing point, is a 360 degree circle around you. And by looking at that, you may mistake that as curvature, but it's not curvature. It's the end of your sight wrapping around, which gives you, it's like looking like I did the video, looking across that round table. It looks like it's curved, but it's not curved. It's just your circle of sight.
Yeah, but you made a video about it. You made a little like diagram. You did it on a table, didn't you?
Yeah, that was on I have a second YouTube channel. It's just called Dawn Gable. And that's where I was going to start putting in these flat earth videos. I was thinking of moving my vacuum chamber video over to that channel, but I've never really done it. Because this channel I have now, my DynoDon channel, that's my flying stuff, my Stan Meyer stuff, and all my other things I do. So I try to just kind of keep that away from my flat earth belief stuff for now. Maybe later on, but it's I've got over 1,000 subs there, 1,100 or more, but the other ones only got a handful. But I just never really. I'm just busy with my hobbies and projects here that I haven't. I got a P900 camera I bought to go out and do some videos, see what everyone else is seeing. But it got to the point where it's been proven 1,000 times I don't need to redo it myself.
Yeah. So thank you for that. There's another subject that Marie wanted to know. I know that we've talked a bit differently about it, but I'm no pilot. But what do you make of the fuel hoax thing?
I think, yeah, my experience working on airplanes and being around airplanes and fueling airplanes. I actually used to, when I was a mechanic after I got out of the service, general aviation mechanic, I started out fueling the commercial airliners. So I used to drive the fuel truck over, hook it up to the bottom of the airplane wing, and fuel the airplane. So I know there was fuel going in them. We're talking, these are DC-9s, the old airplanes of the day. But no, I think that's just somebody who doesn't really understand or know how airplanes are built to understand that. Yeah, you can hold quite a bit of fuel in a wing of an airplane. They're called wet wings. It's the whole wing is a fuel tank. Everything in the wing is sealed up with a special sealant when they build the plane, so it can hold this fuel. Now, it's like I was going to mention to you, just look at a box, a box that's 12 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches, 12 inches wide, 12 inches deep, 12 inches high, a cube, a 1 cubic foot. How much water do you think that 1 cubic foot will hold? How much water do you think that thing can hold in gallons? You first think of it, it'd probably hold a gallon or so of water, right? A 1 cubic foot box can hold 8 gallons of water. That's 8 jugs of milk, over here in the States.
Would you say that it's going to be the same as those great big aeroplanes, the Boeing 747s, the Airbuses? Is it really like some of those wings look very thin and they're carrying tons of engine or those turbines? And so when you're flying, liquid fuel doesn't slosh, nothing like that.
Well, that's again, yeah.
They're talking of tons of gallons of fuel.
Sure. Yeah, well, and a wing is built up of many sections, what we call wing ribs. To keep the shape of the wing, there's sections of wing ribs in there throughout the whole wing, from the belly from the fuselage all the way out to the wingtip. There's sections in there, and all those different sections in there work like baffles, slosh tanks. But then again, a lot of the wings are separated by compartments. There may be 4 or 5 different fuel cells in a wing. So as they start burning fuel, they'll burn it out of the wingtips first, and then start using the fuel from the outboard tanks inward. It may not be one solid tank from the fuselage to the wingtip. There may be 5 separate tanks in there, all independent of the others, and they're all tied through with different valves. And that's what the pilots and engineers do, is they keep switching the fuel tanks as they fly, as they burn down the fuel. And some of the designs, they just automatically transfer fuel out of one tank into a tank that they're constantly taking the fuel from. So it's always moving fuel from one area to another when it's flying. Even in some of the planes I've flown in, there's multiple tanks, and you can select a left tank, a right tank, a center tank. So they're compartmental. When I want to say compartmentalized
Can I ask
compartments.
you something?
Sure.
Can I ask you something? What about the flaps? I mean, I've watched quite a few videos myself that, especially when the plane's landing and someone's sitting on the wing when they're filming, there are so many flaps. I mean, you can see through the wing, and actually what looks like a big sort of area suddenly becomes, oh my God, I can see the runway through half the wing. So those
Sure.
tanks aren't as big as you think they are. And the other thing is, you know, especially when I was actually looking at a wing being made, they've got flaps which come out and slide back in. So they're mechanically, so there's all that mechanical stuff in there with the flaps coming right out and retreat. What do you call it? I can't think of the word. What's the name? Back into the wing. So I mean that takes up a second. So
Yeah,
if
they
you've got the
retract.
flaps and the flaps at the back, and you can see the runway through them, the tanks can't be that big. You know the wings aren't that wide, especially on those the new Airbuses. Those things just are a bit weird to me. Those Airbuses, they almost look like they're remote controlled. Anyway, they just sort of glide through the air like almost at ground level, doing all these things. They're almost in slow motion in front of you. The way that they're able to turn these planes and be able to go quite vertical with these things, I just think they're using kind of military technology in our planes, but they just haven't told us. I don't mean they've got guns and that in them, but I just mean they've things about these big planes. Do you think so?
Well, I'm sure I don't think anything in the civil aviation market has a technology like that that can run on, compressed air. I don't believe that's there yet. I highly doubt it. I still believe, for the most part, that airplanes are fuel based. They're still burning fuel, but the efficiency of the engines nowadays are way, way better than they ever were. The wing compartmental area, the flaps you're talking about, those are generally called Fowler flaps, the kind that come out and retract down, and you can see between the flap and the wing and see down through there. Those are Fowler flaps. It's the same kind of flaps that my C-130s I worked on had. Those go way back to World War II, that flap design. Like the Germans' Stuka dive bombers, I think they had Fowler flaps. But yeah, the flaps, they kind of tuck up into the back aft section of the wing. Most aircrafts will have a main wing spar in there. That's what carries the load of the plane. That's the heaviest part of the wing. It's a big, solid structure, runs from the fuselage all the way to the wingtip. And then there'll be a front spar and a rear spar, just like in my plane here. Between the front spar and the rear spar is a pretty big area to hold fuel in. The flaps and all that other mechanisms will be on the aft of the rear spar, which won't have any kind of fuel stuff back in it. That's where all the control cables, hydraulics, and stuff would be to work those flaps and ailerons out on the wings. But yeah, a wing, you'd be surprised at how much water will fit or fuel would fit into a wing. Those wings, when you're looking at them from a distance like you are, they may look like they're small, but if you get up in there, those wings can be, 4 or 5 feet thick. Like you showed me before, the girl in the video, pictures of her in a wing. Yeah, they're actually pretty big. They do really seem narrow and skinny and long, but like I say,
If they showed
one.
you that picture, that was a Concorde wing, and Concorde wings are very thin, but they had a girl.
They look real thin, but if you get up close and personal to them, you'd probably find out that they are really, really thick. Like I say, that 1 cubic foot box can hold 8 gallons. And if you're talking about a wing that's 5 foot thick at the root, just think how much fuel that can hold at 5 feet. So, yeah, I still think. And then they do have a lot of belly tanks. They have tanks in the fuselage that hold even more. Say again?
Can I ask you something? So
Sure.
we've got a plane, we've got those big turbines which weigh tons, we've got the fuel, we've got obviously the plane itself, the seats, the luggage, the people. I was going on a flight to Edinburgh. There wasn't many people on it because it was a bank holiday weekend, and everybody was coming back from work because obviously people go to work in Edinburgh and stuff. So this is a business plane flight. British Airways were putting on, and there wasn't that many people on the plane. I can't say how many, but there was maybe 20, 30 people on this whatever seated plane, 200 seated plane. And what it was is they said to us we had to sit in different positions all over the plane to balance the plane out. And I'm thinking, you know, when I think about it now, if there's thousands of tons of fuel in there and the engines, what would it make with a few people in it?
I doubt they would do a whole lot. The biggest thing with an airplane weight and balance is you want to keep the weight close to the center of the wing, the midpoint of the wing, front and rear, because that's where the plane will balance on. The balance point of the airplane is about 25 to 30, 37% of the wing's chord, the front to rear. So you come back about 30% from the leading edge back. That's where the airplane will tend to balance. If you put weight out in the nose of the plane, it'll make it nose heavy. If you put too much weight towards the tail, it'll make it tail heavy, which is the worst possible scenario for being out of balance. But yeah, there's a requirements there, and it depends on where they can load the cargo. But 20 or 30 people, I highly doubt it would make that much difference unless they weren't carrying a lot of fuel. If you had them all towards the back of the plane, yeah, it could cause. You're talking, you know, the average person, maybe 150 to 200 pounds times 20 people. You know, you're up to a couple tons of weight. You know, it might be in the back of a plane, and that can be a huge problem for weight and balance. But yeah, I'd say 20, 30 people, it probably wouldn't really make much difference. But pilots do, you know, they do tend to want to keep you all towards the center of the plane. Don't want you spread out all over the place. Plus it's easier for them to calculate the weight and balance. Every time they take off, they got to know how much the baggage weighs, how much fuel they have on board, where it is. There's a balance sheet for the airplane that they know, okay, this is how much fuel is at this point, how much luggage is at this point, and how much you have to calculate the weight and balance before you take off to make sure you're within the limits of the balance. So if they want you in a specific area, it's only because it's probably easier for them to calculate the weight and balance.
Thanks for that. But
it's all part of learning to fly.
Haven't I? That I just think. Oh, sorry, I'm dropping my phone. I just think that I watched some 4D flying. There's a guy who's he's managed to film this thing 4D flying, and that's what those airships look like. There's just something they've done to them. I don't know what they've done. You know, they almost look like and they can go so slow in the sky. I mean, these things are maybe only doing 30, 40 miles. It almost looks like they're standing still sometimes. Great big plane like that just above the ground, almost standing. Almost, it's crazy.
Yeah, so that's where it comes down to what we refer to as power to weight ratio, plus the airfoils that they're using, the shapes of the wings, the airfoil. The technology has come so far with what they call laminar flow airfoils. They're such a clean flow design. They create so much lift. That's why the wings are so skinny looking now. They look real narrow and skinny. They generate so much lift. They're so much more efficient than airfoils from the old days that it's incredible the technology involved. And the engines produce so much power. You got so much power to weight ratio, it's called. How much power thrust do you have compared to the weight of the aircraft? So you got one engine that you say puts out 2,000 pounds of thrust. That 2,000 pounds of thrust is enough to fly like a 4,000 pound airplane. So, and these engines they have probably put out 10, 20,000 pounds of thrust. So the technology for power and the technology of the airfoils of the wings have come a long, long way. So they're very powerful and they generate a ton of lift. So and those flaps, the design of how those flaps come out and down, what that simulates is it extends the chord or the length of the wing from front to rear. They got the flaps in the front that go forward. They got the flaps that go out the back. The flaps in the front are what do they call them? They're not really flaps. I can't think of the term for them. But anyway, what you're doing is you're increasing the overall size of the wing. It's making the wing bigger front to rear, which in turn will generate even more lift, and it'll allow you to slow down to a much slower speed for landing. The goal is to fly the plane as slow as possible, because if you get close to the ground, you want to land as slow as you can because it's easier. And it's safer and less deadly. If you crash doing 200 mile an hour on a landing, you're going to have major fatalities. But if you're coming in at 50 mile an hour, you have less chance of a fatality. But yeah, the idea is land as slow as you can. So that's the whole purpose of the flaps, is to slow the plane down to its minimum speed, so you have a nice, safe, controlled landing. So the slower you can land, the safer it is.
When Patricia was doing some research and she looked up and she was looking at the Wright brothers, because there's things that you look at differently now. And what she noticed was when the Wright brothers took off, they were using fuel, and when they got airborne, they flicked to electric. The plane went electric, so they were flying electrically rather than with fuel.
I'd have to say I've never noticed that. I've never heard that before. Never looked into it, but I'm familiar with the Wright Flyer, but I didn't know they had any electric. All I remember is the engine with the chain drives. And on that airplane, the wings didn't have ailerons that do the banking part. The cables actually hooked to the back edge of the wing, and when you pulled it, it would twist the wing and make the wing twist. And then that was used for your turning and banking.
Anyway, that's just what Patricia, she was looking at a few videos with them in it, and that's what she she said to me. She was a bit shocked. Anyway, just to obviously you've got your experiments on your channel, but I think you've got 2 channels, haven't you, Don?
Yeah, like I said, my second channel is just the Don Gable, and that's where I just got maybe 3 videos for Flat Earth is all.
Okay, so the experiments and the gyrocopter and all that, because I've put a link to your channel in this hangout.
Yeah.
So go there, then your vacuum experiment, your 360, in your gyrocopter, and all that's on there.
Yeah, that's the DynoDon64.
Or you just look up on Sun and Moon as well. But the link's there in the chat room if you want to go to Don's channel, which is full of lots of videos of making a plane.
Yeah, this is a plane, believe it or not. I started it right after I got out of the service, and I got out of the service in '86, and I started building the airplane in 1988. I was 26 years old at that point, 24, 26, something like that. But it was 1980. I just bought the house, so I started building the airplane then. And then a few years into the building that, I got into, I was already modifying and souping up my Mustang. I had an '84 Mustang when I was in the service. So I started, putting heads and cam and intake and carbs and dual exhaust on the car. And then a friend of mine took me to the drag strip and showed me how to drag race. And then the airplane kind of sat on a bench in the garage for years while I was out drag racing and spending all my money on cars for years and years. So I finally gave up the car stuff and decided to finish playing. But over the years, I just kept working on it. It sat for years, a couple years at a time without ever touching it. But just in this last 5 years, since I built my metal building that I'm building in now, I've been working on it pretty steady so I can get it finished. But yeah, I was hoping to have that thing built, in 2 or 3 years when I started it 30 years ago. Actually started building that plane before I ever had a pilot license.
Yeah, and don't forget you were doing your Stan Meyer stuff as well somewhere in there.
Yeah, that, like I said, that slowed me down by that gyrocopter you see my videos of. Normally that would have took me like 2 months to build. It took me 6 or 8 months to build that because that's just when I found the buggy and started working with Dave on that. So that slowed that down tremendously. And then at that same time, that's when I started building my CNC router machine that I make videos of that CNC also. So I don't like buying things. I'd rather build it. If I see something somebody built and is like, I can do that, so I'll build it myself. Um, I don't pay people to do stuff for me. I do it myself. If I don't know how to do it, I'll
Yeah.
learn.
You also said that it's certain months of the year that you would get on with this project. You wouldn't be doing it all year round as well.
Yeah, here I live up in the northeast section of the states. So anytime after November, it's our winter season up here and it starts snowing. And this is an all metal building. There's no insulation, no heat in it. So when it weather turns, starts dropping below 50 degrees, I pretty much stop working on the airplane out in the garage. It's too cold to work, and even if I try to put heat in there, it won't retain the heat. And then when it starts snowing, I just don't like going outside. So I spend the winter in the house, and if I can, I'll work on stuff in the house. Like I got an '83 Mustang car I bought. I'm going to restore. That's one of my next projects after the plane's finished. And I bought all the material, and I've already sewn up the upholstery this past winter for the car. So the seats are all reupholstered, ready to go back in the car when I start on the body. But that's not going to go in the garage until this airplane's finished. And then I just recently picked up a Cessna 150 project that I'll be working on after the Corsair is done too. So when the Corsair is out of the garage and flying, the other airplane and the car is going to go in the workshop garage, and I'll start working on probably both of those. But the Cessna is a project I bought, and it's a two-place Cessna 150, and it's a factory built certified airplane. I'm just going to basically restore it back to flying condition and refurbish and freshen up everything I can, and get it re-inspected, and I'll have a factory built certified airplane, not just a home build. It's to be a certified aircraft, and then
You're
me and
making
wife
the
will be
whole.
able to fly.
You can't maybe make all the engine, do you? But you're actually making the plane, aren't you? The whole thing, the wings, the
Yeah,
body.
the Corsair is if you see the videos, all my videos are titled WAR W.A.R. Corsair update. War Corsair. War stands for War Aircraft Replica. That's the name of the company. Back in 1975-76, they started designing these war aircraft replicas. The Corsair is only one of like a dozen airplanes that they drew drawings for, and these are specifically plans built airplanes. It's like building a big RC model airplane, a radio controlled balsa wood model airplane from the heydays. But it's all built. The plans are full scale. You roll them out on the table and you cut and fit everything right on the airplane plans. But everything on this airplane had to be built from scratch. It's got basically a wooden box structure for the fuselage. Then it's covered in a styrofoam that you can carve and shape to the correct contours. And then it's covered with 2 layers of fiberglass cloth and epoxy resins. But everything on the airplane, from the fuselage, the wings, everything you see was built from raw materials, just from scrap. The landing gear I bought the steel tubing, cut it all up, welded it all up into the pieces, made everything. The only thing I didn't build, was the engine. It's a Subaru car engine. It's a Subaru Legacy 2.2 liter, and I bought a reduction gearbox because car engines run at their max power speeds like 6,000 RPM. A propeller cannot spin at that speed; it's too fast. So you have to put some type of reducing unit on the motor to slow down the propeller. And so I bought a gearbox that was specifically made for this and put that on there. But the landing gear, the mechanisms, the hydraulic systems that retract the gear up in, all the controls, everything on that airplane is built from scratch. It's a true experimental home built.
It's a car plane, Don.
Yeah, yeah, it's what we call an auto engine conversion for aircraft. They're very popular.
So, just asking you, how much does this cost you to build this? If you don't have to tell us if you don't want to, but how much does it cost you?
No, not a
Plane?
problem. I expected to have between 5 and 10,000 into it, but it's probably going to be between $10,000 and $15,000 by the time it's done, which is still cheap for an
And
airplane.
how many hours?
Pardon?
How many hours,
To build?
roughly, do you think?
The original, when I first bought the plans back in 1986, they were saying it was like 1,200 hours to build, and then as the years went on, that 1,200 turned into a 2,500 hour project, and I would say it's probably at least a 2,000 hour project.
I bet you can't wait to get it finished to actually fly it.
Yeah, that's going to be great, and I'm hoping to have it in flying condition next summer. That's the goal. But it'll be a blast because this airplane is the landing gear retracts up into the wings. There'll be doors that close. That's where I'm at right now. I'm working on the doors that will close behind the wing, the landing gear. So when you fly overhead, you won't see any of the gear, none of the wheels or nothing. They'll all be tucked inside, closed up. And that's what I'm working on now. The airplane is currently in its upside down state because that's what I'm working on the bottom of the plane. It's physically ready for paint. As soon as I get the landing gear doors, which I hope to have done this weekend, get those finished up and attached and working, then I can literally paint the bottom of the airplane and then roll it back over on its landing gear, and then I can finish doing the finishing work on the top of the plane, getting it ready for paint. But the goal is to get the gear done, the gear doors fixed, and paint the whole plane. It'll be physically painted to the color it's got to be, and then I'll roll it back over onto its feet, and then it's just a matter of finishing the top end up. You know, it's all fiberglass. I just have to put on the like the Bondo, the putty to fill in all the imperfections of the fiberglass and smooth everything out, and then get it ready for paint. And then all I have left to do is make the little bubble canopy, like the window that goes over the where you sit. That's a bubble canopy. I have to make that out of plexiglass and put the
So
engine back on.
you're at the latter part of this project now.
Yeah, I'm in the finishing stages, what you would classify as the finishing.
So
The,
what's this? You just sort of really, apart from obviously like the landing gear, and we know the engine is going to be whatever the materials. But what's the rest of the plane made of? Fiberglass, wood.
yeah, the main structure of the aircraft that carries the loads, the G forces, the strength of the airplane is a wooden box structure. It's a truss design type. It's all 3/4 inch by 3/4, which would be like 20 millimeter square lumber stock that's all built like a truss, and it's covered with a thin 1.5 millimeter sheet of plywood. And the wings, the spars of the wings are 2 inches thick, which are maybe like 50 millimeters thick by 6 to 8 inches tall, which is however many millimeters I'm trying to convert for you guys over there. But anyway, it's real heavy structure. And then the styrofoam is what gives you, because the fuselage is literally square. It looks like a boat, a square boat, before you cover it with the styrofoam. And the styrofoam is there to give you the general shape of the airplane, to make it look like a Corsair, and also to give you the wings and the tail section. It's all styrofoam. And then that styrofoam has two layers of...
Where are your tanks then? So Super Leads in the chat room says, where are your fuel tanks? Are they in the wings
Okay,
then?
no, the fuel tank is right behind the engine and in front of the cockpit. If you look at the plane right now, it's upside down. It's kind of a hole in the bottom of the fuselage when it's upside down. But when it's right side up, the fuel tank sits right in front of me, basically right over my feet, right behind the engine. It's the top round section of the fuselage, and it sinks down inside and sets down and inside the cockpit just above my legs. It'll hold 15 gallons of fuel, and it'll go...
50 then.
Say that again?
How far can you fly on 15 gallons?
Figuring the engine will probably burn between 4 to 5 gallons an hour. I'd say the range would be about 3 hours, but that 3 hours will be at about 150 to 160 miles per hour. So I can go maybe 450 miles on a tank of gas in 3 hours.
Wow, so it's not burning that much then?
No, that's what's nice about that Subaru engine. It's all fuel injected too. The fuel injection, the computer right out of the car, everything is converted to run this engine in the airplane. It thinks it's still in the car, the engine. So yeah,
You don't put your
I had
foot,
to.
you don't put your foot
Yeah.
down then.
Well, in an airplane, you have a throttle lever, a push-pull lever, or a
Yeah.
push-pull cable.
So also, I remember you telling us before, it takes quite a lot to get your plane like passed, doesn't it? So what do you have to go through to get this plane, like once you've actually built it, what do you have to do so you can actually fly it?
It's nothing more than just first thing you have to do is request an aircraft number, an N number, as we call it here in the States. Over like in Germany, their number starts with a G. Canada starts with a C. Uh, America is N for North America. Every country has a different letter designation for their numbers of the airplane. So first, I have to request an N number for here in the States, and you can request a specific number, numbers, letters, combination, whatever you like. Otherwise, they'll just issue you a number if you don't request one. Once you get that, then you put that on the plane. When the plane's finished, all I need to do is call the FAA up and say, hey, I have a home-built airplane. I would like you guys to come and inspect it and issue me an airworthiness certificate. So you'll make arrangements with them. They'll come out, they'll look over the plane, and basically they're just going to look it over and see your workmanship. How, does this thing look safe? Do they deem it safe to fly? If they see that it's a particular model and it's got a good track record and the design is sound, they're basically looking at your workmanship. How good of a job did you do building the airplane? If they look at it and say, we deem it looks safe to fly, that's all they're going to do. They're going to issue an airworthiness certificate saying, okay, we deem this plane looks safe to fly. But they're not certifying it as like factory built. They're just saying they think it's safe to fly. You're on your own. But you have to have that airworthiness certificate. And then once you get that, they also give you an area, like say you pick an airport where you want to fly from. They'll give you an area of a radius of maybe 50 or 100 miles that you cannot go outside of that area for 40 hours. Now, because I'm using a non-certified engine and a non-certified propeller, I have to fly 40 hours in this little playpen they give you to fly in to basically test the airplane out. And after I do the 40 hours of flying and log it all down in my logbooks that I've done this 40 hours, then I can fly it anywhere in the world that I have the equipment to legally fly to. So, but if I had an engine that was like an aircraft designed and built and certified engine and a certified propeller by Cessnich or Macaulay or someone like that, and it's certified, then I only have to do a 20-hour flight. But since my engine and prop are not a certified combination, which is legal, I have to do 40 hours before I can fly it outside of a given test area. Basically, you're the test pilot. You're going to be testing this airplane for the first 40 hours. And after 40 hours, if it doesn't fall out of the sky, I can go anywhere with it. I can go to Canada. I can go overseas, wherever.
Who keeps an eye on the hours? Is it something that you have to have recorded? So who do you say, oh, I've done 5 hours a day, or do they know? How do they know you've done the flying?
Every airplane, when you build it, you put an hour meter in it. It's just like equipment for maintenance purposes. They'll have a Hobbs. Over here they used to call them Hobbs meters. It's just an hour meter. As soon as you turn the power on or you start the engine, the meter starts clicking. It's a clock, and it records. It just keeps building this time up and up and up. And so as you go flying, you fly around, you come back, you look at that meter and you write down, and you look at the meter when you start, and you look at the meter when you're done, and you write it in the log book. Okay, I was out for 1.2 hours today. You write it down. And then so when you sell an airplane, One of the main things you write down is how many hours are on the engine, how many hours are on the airplane. Because sometimes, you buy a brand new airplane, everything is 0 hours, like mine will be. And then as I fly it, and if the engine wears out and I buy a new engine and put a new engine on there, you're going to keep track of the hours on the engine and the hours on the airframe of the airplane. So it's all logbook. It's under the maintenance logs that you carry for the plane, and then your logbook for how many hours you fly. So when you're flying, people say, "Oh, I've got 1,000 hours of flying down." That's time that you've logged in your book, and you write down the number of the airplane you used, where you took off from, where you landed, how long the flight was, how many takeoffs, how many landings, general information like that. So you logbook everything like a truck driver has to, over the road trucker.
So how many planes have got car engines in them, just asking?
Oh, I'd say it's one of those niches that you really got to know. A lot of people, when they want to build an airplane, they're going to buy an aircraft engine and put in it because they don't know nothing about engines or cars. They don't know anything. They just build an airplane. But people that have the knowledge and skills to do stuff like that, they'll do it, because it's cheaper. A typical engine. Now, if I had to buy the engine that this airplane was designed for, it's like a $25,000 engine. So people say, well, I can put a $500 car engine in there instead. But in the long run, I've still got maybe $5,000 just into my engine setup. But there's quite a few, but not a lot. I mean, it's probably less than 10% of the home builds out there that have auto engine conversions. But there's more and more companies now popping up that are building what they would call firewall forward packages. They do all the designing for this engine to fit this specific airplane, this home built airplane, and they'll sell you this whole package. You bolt it on, you hook up the power, wires, and fuel, hit the key, and you go flying. All the work is done for you. That's for the person that doesn't know how to do that. Otherwise, they would just go buy an airplane engine, put it on like the plans call for, and hope it flies. But and a lot of people nowadays don't want to build them; they just want to buy them. So that's where they came out with this light sport aircraft category that will allow you to buy a non-certified home-built airplane built by the factory who designed the plane, and they can sell it just like a Cessna could sell a Cessna to you. So they've come out with another category, but those planes are $100,000 plus. It's an average person can't afford that. It was meant to be a low-cost alternative to general aviation, but it's just as expensive, if not more expensive.
Yeah, quite an expensive hobby there, but I really want to see you flying your plane. It'd be a bit. I just think it's a bit strange in the car engine. You obviously don't, because you're.
Well, if you ever seen a Subaru engine, if you ever seen an airplane engine is called like a Cessna. They use a Continental or a Lycoming engine. If you look at them, they're a flat pancake engine. It has 4 cylinders. 2 engines stick out to the right. 2 cylinders stick out to the right. 2 cylinders stick out to the left, like an old Volkswagen Beetle engine. If you ever seen them, they look like a flat engine. 2 cylinders left, 2 cylinders right. That's how aircraft engines are built. And so the Subaru engine is like a Volkswagen engine. It's a flat 4 engine. So it fits in a conventional airplane just like an airplane engine. Now, if you get another kind of car like a Honda or a Kia or something like that, where it's a straight 4-cylinder, they stick straight up and down, so they're taller than they are wide. And they don't fit too well in the engine compartment of an airplane because they're designed for a flat pancake motor, not a vertical inline engine like in a car. So the Subaru is nice because it's small, lightweight, smaller than a aircraft engine, and has more power than an aircraft engine, but it has a higher RPM for that power. So you have to put on what they call a propeller speed reduction unit, a PSRU. You have to. There could be a belt drive, could be a gear drive, could be a chain drive, any combination. So, but you have to add that to it. So that adds a little more weight to it. So there's all types of ways of doing it. And mine is a gearbox design. But you got to slow the propeller down because a propeller has a speed limit. If the tip of the propeller travels faster than the speed of sound, it goes sonic. A propeller can't do that, so you have to slow the propeller down to get it into its operating range. So, but airplane engines, like a Cessna, like the plane I just bought, the little Cessna 150, it has an RPM limit of 2,400, and the Subaru is 6,000. So it's like 3 times as fast.
So how does it go? Like when you put all this in, you just got to hope that you have wired and everything up properly then. Because first takeoff, will you be a bit nervous? Just asking.
Yeah, you got to have faith in your work. I've played with engines all my life, from lawnmowers, go-karts, mini bikes, right up to drag racing, 800 horsepower engines. That's what my Mustang used to make, was over 800 horsepower. I'd do 130 mile an hour in a quarter mile, from 0 to 130 in 10 seconds. So I've been around engines all my life, and I went to, school in the military to learn engines, jet engines and all that. So I learned all that, but it's just a lifelong skill, and I have confidence in everything I do and build.
Okay, someone in the chat room, simply, so just like you to explain exactly what engine that you've used in your plane.
Explain the engine?
Yeah, explain what actually the engine, the size of whatever it is of the engine. He said, just says,
it's a Subaru. It's right out of a 1995 Subaru Legacy, which they call the EJ22 engine. It's a 2.2 liter or 2200 cc 4-cylinder water-cooled engine, fuel injected. All I did was bought that along with the computer and the harness out of the car, modified the harness, rewired it with aircraft wiring, and eliminated all the junk on the motor that isn't needed for the airplane. All the emissions, pollution controls are gone. The only thing on the engine that's left is the alternator. The water pump is built right into the motor, and then there's the timing belt that runs the camshafts on the cylinder heads. But that's it. And then the intake manifold was a big cast aluminum intake. I took and cut that all down and made a little bit of tubing, bent aluminum tubing, and re-welded up and made a lower profile, lighter weight engine. I reduced as much weight off of the engine as I can to shed weight, and then made up a custom mount to mount that engine to the airplane. But literally, it's straight out of the car. It's never been apart. The engine only had 5,000 miles in it when the car was totaled. So I bought the engine basically brand new, and it was all hooked up, wired, and fuel to it and run before I pulled it off to do the work on to flip the plane over. There are videos on my YouTube channel show the engine running, and as soon as I flip it over, I can put that all back together and get it running again. But it's all ready to go as soon as I finish the airplane.
Well, how much longer do you reckon you've got to go before you finish it now then? How many more months?
I'm hoping to have it finished as far as the paint job. I want to get it painted before winter sets in here. And then over the winter, I'll have to buy the instruments. I don't have any of the instruments to put in the plane yet, other than, I got like a fuel gauge, a tachometer, and water temp, stuff like I have a few simple gauges, but I need the altimeter, the airspeed indicator, the minimum gauges that I need to buy for the flying part of it. There's only a handful of instruments that's got to be put in it. So I got to get those, put those in. I have to make the plexiglass canopy windshield for it. That's basically all it's left to do, is finish it, get it primed up and ready for paint. I want to get that done this year, and I'm hoping to be testing next year, next summer. Hoping to have it ready to fly. What was that?
And I said, hey, and you can keep up with DynoDon on his channel.
Yeah, I'm trying to do a video every Sunday. So once a week, after I work on it all weekend, I'll do a video and then I put it up Sunday night, and it's usually viewable Monday morning. Uh, I try to keep my videos short, around 5 or 6 minutes because my internet speed is so slow, and I'm recording with a high def camera, and it takes on average 3 hours to upload a video. It's only 5 or 6 minutes. This last week's was almost 8 minutes, and it probably took 4 to 5 hours to upload. The week before that was, oh gosh, what was it? 15 or something minutes long, and it was probably a 6 hour upload. I just turn it on at night when I go to bed, and I get up in the morning, it's done.
Mm. Mine's a bit
So,
quicker than that. So we do moan over here about our internet. Like Patricia, we lost Patricia just because she's having internet problems. And you know what?
yeah,
I never really
mine.
knew what it was about. But now I've joined Virgin Media and everything's cable, and I've got a package of like the television and the internet. It was all done on one thing. My daughter watches the television. I don't watch it anymore. But basically, this thing decides, hey, I'm just going to reboot myself. It's done it once in a Hangout, and this is what's happening. The thing is just trying to reboot itself and reboot it. Sometimes it can take. It's fine again. Most weird. Wasn't like that with my other provider.
Yeah, my
So
service
yeah, we have
here.
the
I was gonna say my
yeah.
service here is through the Verizon phone, and it's DSL, and it's only 1.5 meg is all it's running at on a good day.
Right. Thank you so much for explaining that about your plane, and you're a very interesting man, and I say a daredevil. What's your thoughts on Q? Just asking. Do you follow that one? As you
Um,
seem to be
yeah, I was catching a little bit. I don't follow it religiously. I'd seen most of it just from some Alex Jones videos I watch occasionally, and now he got kicked off of YouTube and Facebook and everywhere else. But I think uh, I think he's military intelligence that's responsible. These people are responsible for getting Trump in office, and I think they're on the up and up. I believe because they are saying things that um, come to light and prove. I mean, it's all cryptic, but I think it's part of the force that got Trump elected.
So you think Q is real then, and not just another psyop or just another?
I well, I'm hoping he's real. Put it that way. I haven't really followed him. I've known just enough to think that he is. If they are real, they're trying to help Trump, and I think they were responsible for getting Trump in office. I think this has been the people that tried to get Trump into office tried to do it like 10 years ago, but he didn't want to do it because of his television stuff and his money making ventures. But I think they're real. I think it's real. I don't think it's a bluff, but I really don't follow it that much. I just hear pieces here and there. And lately, I probably haven't seen anything about it for a month myself.
Hmm. You said before when you came on that you've been obviously still looking at a lot of videos. So what's the bit in Flat Earth that's caught your eye lately?
Um, Most of the time, I listen to Globebusters every Sunday when they're on. I love listening to Jaron stuff. I watch anything that just kind of piques my interest. I'm always looking for new things that people have discovered. A lot of the information they had about the boats going over the curve, have all been debunked from atmospheric phenomenon, distortions, optical illusion, stuff like that. Finding out that we can see farther than they say you're supposed to be able to. All that stuff is neat. I'm always looking to see what else is new. What else is new? And Antonio Subarats had a video up last week of a guy who is a doctor, as in engineering degree, a doctorate degree, and he went out to check on this, and he's doing videos and saying, okay, does these observations do they look like they could be done on a sphere, or do they look like they can only do it on a flat plane? And he's finding out really quick that everything he sees and records and measures and is only possible on a flat plane. So I think this guy is going to be a flat earther in no time, and he's got a doctorate's degree. So I look for stuff like that.
Can I just say something to you, because you said Globebusters, and Bob's wife Cammie's in the chat room, and she just put loads of hearts.
Oh,
Just so
yeah. Yeah, I see. I met him. At the conference. I met Bob. I don't know that I met Cammie. She wasn't with Bob when I talked to Bob, but I did talk to Bob. I talked to Jaronism. I got to see Mark. I talked to Mark. Talked to Patricia. Talked to Rob Skiba, excuse me. Who else?
Hide and Survive.
I didn't see him. I didn't see him there. Let's see who else. But yeah, I got to meet all the big wigs. Robbie Davison, got to see them all, meet them. But I got to physically talk to all of them.
Are you going to the Denver one in November?
No, that's a little too far for me. That's clear across the country for me. That's like over 2,000-mile trip, and I haven't been on a commercial airliner since I got out of the service. I fly them, I don't fly in them.
Hopefully, as well, when you're looking through some of these videos, you do catch up on Sun and Moon occasionally as well. Don.
Yeah, I get your notices. I see them a lot. I just haven't been watching too many because I'm spending most of my time on my projects. The summertime, I get outside and do a lot of work. So, but then I'll come home and I'll sit in here chair and I'll turn a video on and listen to it. But no, I'm sorry I haven't really followed much lately on where you guys been and what you've been up to.
Yeah, well, I've been putting a few videos out of actually our sort of members. Flat Earth Dude did an amazing capture with his telescope of these balloon thing going across the front of the moon. We put Dave Marsh's test of how he sees the moon. That's on there with his moon races and stuff. And I think he's doing a sun race one now. Yeah, put his video up, and I quite like one with Stevens, his name, about how a plane could fly, because if you had to fly down the ball, you'd have to sort of basically do go round and round, loop to loop down, and none of that happens. You don't fly down. So that's just like, if people could just get their heads around that, like you don't fly down or helicopter down to Peru or something from America. These things just don't happen.
Yeah, we're not flying around a ball. We're not trying to maintain our altitude over a ball. I've catched the ones where Mr. Thrive and Survive's been on, so I've been watching his stuff, and I listened to I listened to all of Mark Sargent's stuff, and I just watched him and Patricia last night with their weekly show. A lot of times your stuff's on, Yeah,
we were on a bit earlier or something. So I've forgotten. Are we 5 or 6 hours in front of you?
5 hours. That's some of the problem is when you're on, I'm in bed. A lot of times.
In bed?
Well, by the time I see some of your, I know you guys are. See, you're. It's only going on 6 p.m. here my time. Yeah, but yeah, I'm usually. I don't get out of work till 3:30, and like I say, walk the dog by 4 o'clock, and then I do a few things, and I might be outside working around, and by the time I get into house, it's you guys shows are pretty much already over by then.
We have talked about quite a lot today because I put all these little pointers down to talk about you. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about today?
Yeah, like I say, I haven't really been up on what you guys have discussed lately. I haven't seen much lately on your programs to see what subjects you've had. And if it's anything I have any knowledge of. Anymore, I'm just kind of listening to see what's new and what people are discovering. And that's all. A lot of times, that's what I'm looking for is, what's a new. So I like the
Yeah, I
newest
think
thing that just.
since you came on before, we've had convex Earth. We've had that one.
Yeah,
Wasn't
that
sure about
was
that one.
interesting. That one, I still think that there's probably some truth stuff in there. If they say they were researching this, what, 5, 6 years ago, that would be interesting to prove. The newest thing is that pole-to-pole flight that was just disappeared, canceled.
What's that? Sorry, you just cut out a little bit. Then what did you
Uh,
say?
that pole-to-pole flight that they were going to fly around the pole, the website and everything disappeared. All the people's money disappeared. That was going to be like $20,000 a seat to fly from the North Pole to the South Pole to the North Pole. They were going to circumnavigate the globe.
Oh, I hadn't
Do you
heard
have
about
ever heard about that? Yeah, that was supposed to happen in what, like October, November, and they were taking money for tickets to fly on this flight, and it was like a $20,000 flight. They were going to fly you around the pole, circumnavigate the globe, north to south, and it's gone. It's like it was a fraud. The website and everything's gone.
That's terrible. Then.
But I guess it went through a ticketing agency. I don't know if you've seen Ranty's been going around, Ranty Flat Earth from Nathan Oakley's show. He's been going around and around with a guy by the name of Greater Sapien. Well, he had done a funding thing through, I don't know, GoFundMe or something, and raised the $20,000 to buy the ticket to go on the flight because he's a Glober ball believer. And then this thing popped up. It's all gone. It disappeared just this past week. It's nobody can find it anymore. It's gone, and all these people have paid for their tickets. But I don't know if they're going to get refunded.
You know how much then, roughly? Because they must say it somewhere. How much money did they take and steal then?
I can't remember how many seats it was supposed to be, but they were going to have a barber on board. You could get a haircut, and they had wine tasting, a whole bunch of crap on there. It was all, it apparently was all bogus, or they got to the point where Flat Earth got onto them and it scared them and they ended up backing down or something, but it's hard to say. But
Well,
it
and
was
so,
called.
do you know how many people bought tickets?
I don't know. I haven't seen the numbers, but it was supposed to happen in a couple of months. They've been selling the tickets. This popped up back at the beginning of the year, and then people were flat earthers. Somebody else was doing a GoFundMe to raise the money to take the flight, and he was going to take some test equipment, gyros or whatever, to try and prove that they were actually going around the South Pole. And then the company found out that flat earthers were wanting to do this, and they said nobody will be allowed to bring any equipment on board for disproving the globe or something like that. And then now it's gone. Everything's gone.
Maybe it was just Flat Earthers buying tickets.
But that Greater Sapien took the money and supposedly said he bought a ticket, but he won't prove that he has a ticket for it. And so everyone's saying, what are you going to do? Keep the money now? Steal the money? And it was all a big scam. But I don't know how many. I can't remember if it was supposed to be like 200 seats they were selling. This was going to be on a big Airbus or something.
Well, as we find out, most things are a con and a lie, aren't they?
Yeah, either that or they made the plans to do all this but couldn't get the permits to fly over the Antarctic, because you got to jump through hurdles and hoops to even get permission to go close to the place. And for somebody to come out of the blue and say they're going to do this flight, they may not have really looked into what was involved in getting it, or it was just a scam from the start.
So, this weekend for you, you're back on making your plane?
Yeah, every weekend. That's all I do is spend the whole weekend out in the garage. The last couple months have been extremely hot and humid here. The last 2 weekends have been really, really good and enjoyable weather to work in, so I've been able to get quite a bit done. And then during the weekdays like now, it's beautiful out to work now, but it was going to be on this But I probably won't go out till Saturday morning. I'll go out 9 in the morning and stay till 6, 7 o'clock at night and just work on it nonstop.
You want it finished now, Don, the plane?
Yeah, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel right now. It's a race to get there.
Yeah, Nimble Horse has just put a link in about the Polar Explorer over the pole. Oh, it's a scam.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the whole, and then I guess the website was set up through a Wix. You know that Wix they advertise? You see the commercials on all the YouTube videos for Wix, how to build your own website. That's what they used to build a website, was Wix. One of those free website ads. But it looked all professional and everything.
It could never happen, could it, anyway?
No. And there was a flat earther that was advertising. I think he got his ticket and was planning on taking some gear with him. So, compasses, GPS, whatever he could get on board to run some little tests to prove that they actually were crossing the South Pole. And then they came out and says, nope, not going to allow any test experiment equipment on board.
Yeah, you can see why maybe, but they should give the people's money back, shouldn't they?
Yeah, well, that's just it. There's nobody to contact. But I guess from what Mark, Sargent, and Patricia and them were talking about, and I think Globebusters was talking about it, was that there was a ticketing agency that was handling the ticket sales. So if they have the money to refund, or if they sent the money on to the company, I'm not too clear on that part yet. People are still digging into it. It just happened recently, within days, I think, this past week.
Ridiculous amount of money to ask people in the first place, isn't it? $20,000. That's a lot of money.
Oh yeah, the price, and that was probably the cheap ticket. There was different ticket options, and there was like super first class tickets, and then there was coach tickets. But the coach tickets were 20 grand.
Wow. Well, the poor people who bought the tickets then. Don, we've been going for nearly 2 hours. Do you think that that's enough time now? Because obviously we've talked about a load of stuff and really enjoyed it. You're a very clever man, and I'm amazed at your patience.
Yeah, that's fine with me. The wife will be home in about a half an hour, and should be wanting to get dinner ready anyway. So, and since we've just you and I on here, I mean, there's not much to hash back and forth without people asking some extra questions. But anytime you want me to come back.
The chat room asked a few questions there. Well, we'll finish this hangout now. It's been really great. Obviously, we see you as our friend anyway, and it's really good catching up with you. We'll say goodbye publicly, but I'll just say goodbye to you off air. But thank you to the chat room. Shout out to the chat room. Mwah, to the chat room. And thank you, Patricia, although she had problems. And thank you so much for that, Don. And, of course, we will keep up with you to find out what happens with your plane.
Yeah, like I say, once a week I do a video every Sunday of my updates. So I'll keep doing that. As long as I'm working on it, I'll keep posting them so people will see how I'm getting along.
Well, thank you so much for that, Don. And I always say it, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. We're back tomorrow, so we'll see you all tomorrow. Mwah. Thank you, Don.
Sure thing. Goodbye.